This happened a few years ago when I was in college. I lived in Isla Vista, the student community at UCSB, notorious for being a party school. It fully lived up to its reputation. I liked to party, but these people were off the wall. As such, there were a lot of different people who put themselves in dangerous situations, drinking to excess and generally not being careful. It had a very isolated and insular vibe, and anyone hanging around who wasn't college-aged immediately looked strange and out of place. One night, after hanging out with some of my friends, I came home to my small house, where I lived with two other girls. It was around 2:30 a.m. We were all serious students, and weren't super big into the huge parties. When we did party, however, it was more like a small get-together with friends. We would often have a few people spend the night, either sleeping on the couches or the floor. That night, my roommates had a few people over who I didn't know. When I stepped inside, I noticed one of them had opted to sleep on the couch from the shadow that I saw laying there. I didn't turn the light on, since I didn't want to wake anyone. As I was passing the couch to enter my bedroom, I noticed that the figure was lying very stiff. He just had this weird energy to him. He was laying down, but it was like he was putting all of his energy into laying as still and rigid as possible. I paused, and the guy quickly jerked his head to face me, without moving his limbs, so quickly that it startled me. I could see his wide open eyes glinting in the dark. Figuring that I'd startled him, or he had too much to drink, I hurried past into my bedroom and locked the door. The dude made me nervous, and I wasn't taking any chances. After a while, I finally fell asleep. At 4:30 a.m., I woke up. There was a strange sound at my door, almost like someone was drumming their fingers against the wood very quietly. I laid still and listened. There were more quiet sounds, like someone scratching the door with their fingers, which got louder and louder, until it was clear that he was using both hands and scratching as fast and as hard as possible. It created an extremely loud and intimidating sound that filled me with fear. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and texted my roommate, since I was afraid to make a sound. "Your friend is freaking me out. Can you talk to him? He's banging and scratching on my door." She didn't text back, probably because she was asleep. I texted my other roommate to the same effect, covering all my bases. Keep in mind that the scratching had been going on for a couple minutes at that point. I have no idea how he could have sustained it. Scratching a wooden door with your fingernails can't feel good. He also grabbed at the knob and jiggled it super forcefully. Because neither of them answered, I decided to call and really wake them up, though I was scared to make a sound. I know it sounds stupid, but there was something seriously terrifying about being teased like this through the door. I knew that he was trying to terrify me. I felt like a little kid, but I could tell this guy was screwed up or something, and considered calling the police. I still wanted to talk to my roommates, since it was probably one of their friends. The scratching stopped abruptly, and I called my roommate, who answered sleepily. "Your friend is really messed up. Can you please deal with it? I don't want to call the cops." She didn't say anything for several seconds, and when she did speak, her voice had no tiredness in it at all. "What friend?" "The guy that was sleeping on the couch," I said. She was quiet again. "We didn't have any guys over. Call the police." My adrenaline surged, and I told her to please lock the bedroom door as quickly as possible. I realized that I hadn't heard scratching in a while, and I had no clue where the guy had gone. Suddenly, I heard a loud banging in the other end of the house, where my roommates shared a bedroom. The bangs were followed by the sound of them screaming in fear. I quickly dialed the police, as this maniac proceeded to bang against the locked bedroom door of my two roommates as they screamed. The heaviness of the blows left no doubt that he was trying to break the door down. I alerted the 911 operator of the situation, and she dispatched 2 squad cars. The police in Isla Vista are generally used to peeling off drunks off the sidewalk and breaking up fights. This was really serious and strange, and I think the dispatcher got the sense from my tone how terrified I was, and she stayed on the phone with me. At one point, the banging stopped, and everything was quiet for a while. I talked with the dispatcher and suddenly looked down to see that the guy had slipped his fingers through the 1-inch gap between my door and the floor and was just kind of moving them around, making this weird growling sound. I screamed and backed away, trying to keep the little composure I had. When the cops showed up, I heard running and the sound of our glass sliding door opening and closing, and then he was gone. The cops never caught him. He had broken in through our side door by jimmying the lock somehow. My door was covered in what turned out to be huge gauges he'd made using a pair of scissors, which he discarded on the ground before he left. What terrifies me most about this was that I walked right past him. I looked him right in the face. I realized now that he was not trying to sleep, but was lying so stiff like that because he was hiding. He probably heard me open the front door and freaked out because he hadn't realized there was another girl living there and tried to blend into the couch in the darkness. At the time this happened, I was a 19-year-old sophomore in college. I was living on campus in their apartment-style dorms, and my college wasn't exactly in the nicest part of the city, so I'd usually drive a little bit farther to go grocery shopping, so I could be in a little bit more of a safer area. The night this happened, I was going to cook dinner and realized I didn't have some of the spices I needed. Normally, I would have just said forget it and made something else, but the meat had already been thawed for a day or so, and I needed to cook it. I debated just going to the Walmart that was 2 minutes away from my campus, but it was getting late, and I didn't want to go there by myself in the dark. That Walmart is right next to a major highway, and being a girl, by herself, I felt uncomfortable risking it. So instead, I went to the Walmart that was about 20 minutes away, a few towns over. I finally arrived and bought my spices, along with a few other things, and checked out with no problem. By the time I was done, it was now completely dark out. I was leaning over the front passenger side of my car, putting my bags on the seat, when I noticed a woman staring at my car. She was maybe in her 50s, and was standing a short distance away, looking at the back of my car. At the time, I drove a really old car, and if you know a lot about cars, you'd be surprised that it was still running. I've had a few people in the past look at it, or come up and ask me about it. I figured that this is what that lady was doing, and I kind of ignored it, until out of the corner of my eye, I saw her come around my car and stop about 2 feet behind where I was standing. I was parked next to a parking lot median, so it wasn't like she was getting in a car next to me. "Excuse me," she said. I turned around, saying, "Yes," kind of prepared to answer the "what year model is your car" question. "My church is giving out leftover boxes of food from our food drive to people in need. Could I give you one? We have them in our car over there." This immediately set off an alarm in my head. I mean, she had just seen me put my groceries in my car. Why would I need something else if I just went shopping? Also, the churches and food pantries around my college were usually cleaned out after they had their shopping days for the people who really relied on things like food drives. There was hardly, if ever, anything that was just left over. I read enough of my friend's Facebook posts to know that this felt like a human trafficking lure. I stuttered over my words a bit at first, trying to figure out what to say, but finally got out, "Oh no, thank you, I'm good. I'd like to see it go to someone who could really use it." I felt like that was an okay response if she was really handing out boxes. "Are you sure? They're just right over here in my car," she said, taking a step and making the gap between us a little smaller. I was panicking. As she stepped closer, I tried to nonchalantly put my hand in my bag and look for the small pocket knife my dad had given me. My mind was racing as I tried to find the knife, but also tried to keep my face looking calm and not suspicious. I repeated to her that I was good, and the box of food should go to someone who could really use it. She finally seemed to let up, saying, "Okay, have a good night." I told her to have a good night as well. Then as soon as her back was turned, I got into my car and locked all the doors. As I pulled out of my parking spot, I noticed that the car she was walking to had 3 large men standing at the trunk of the car. They were barely illuminated by the parking lot lights, but I think it was an early 2000s white Nissan. As I tried to go down the parking lot aisle as fast as I could, I saw the men looking at the back of my car, just like the woman had. I then noticed where their eyes were shifted to. They weren't looking at my car, they were looking at my license plate. Just as I got to the end of the aisle, waiting to turn, I saw 2 of the men get in the front seats, and the other man and the woman get in the back seat. Their car started, and they began to pull out too. I was having a full-blown panic attack now. Just a week before, my friend had posted something on her Facebook about how 2 men followed her and her mom through a Walmart. Again, I had watched enough crime shows to know that this wasn't painting a pretty picture. I finally got my opportunity to turn, but the car was coming up behind me. I made the quick decision to take a really odd way back to campus. I made a ton of turns, and went through a lot of small streets instead of taking one of the 2 main roads. I don't think I saw the car again after I pulled out of the parking lot, but I was definitely not risking it. By the time I got back to my college, I had calmed down a little. I started to wonder if I was overthinking it, and maybe those people were really doing something good for the world. I decided that if they were really giving out boxes of food, then hopefully it does go to someone in need. That was, until I was walking behind my car, heading towards my building. The letters, SF, were faintly written in white sidewalk chalk on the brown paint of my car. I was shocked and terrified, knowing that I definitely didn't put that there. I practically dropped my bags on the ground and rushed to wipe the chalk off with the sleeve of my jacket. My car had been tagged. After a few seconds of wiping, the chalk was gone, so I locked my car, grabbed my bags, and raced into my building. I got into my dorm and saw the dinner I was supposed to make, but I had lost my appetite completely. I put everything away and went into my bedroom, still reeling over what had happened in the last 45 minutes. I sent the whole story as a Snapchat video to some of my friends, who were just as shocked as I was. My one friend said that she thinks the letters SF stood for single female. It made sense, which made the whole experience that much scarier. I called my mom afterward and told her everything that happened, and by the end of the call, she was sending me an Amazon package with pepper spray in it. I didn't go out after dark by myself for about 2 weeks after that happened, and I had a friend from campus go with me, or I just wouldn't go. The whole situation was terrifying, but I think the strangest part about all of it was that it was supposed to be a safer area. I drove all the way to that Walmart because I had a bad feeling about the one that was closest to me. I started going to the Walmart that was closer to me after that, and I've never had a negative experience since. It's hard to believe that all the stuff I've seen on TV and the internet could have almost happened to me. This happened in 2016, when I was a 17-year-old first-year college student in film school. When I left for college, I got my first apartment. It was really small, but I was really proud of my new independence. I never felt unsafe in the apartment for several reasons. There were multiple gates in the residence that needed to be opened through a code that only people who lived there knew. My door had 2 different locks, and it was right next to the university, so the majority of people who lived in the neighborhood were college people. Up until this point, I never had a problem with anyone, and the apartment and surrounding area was generally safe. I've always been careful to make sure I lock the door when I leave, and developed a habit to always check twice, just to be safe. I've never had a problem with the locks until a few months ago, when I left my apartment to go to class. When I went to lock the door, I couldn't get the key out of the lock. It was completely stuck. I went to get the caretaker of the building to help me, but he wasn't there, so I didn't have time to stick around since I'd be late for class. I knew I wouldn't be gone long, and since I didn't have much of a choice, I left the key inside the lock. I took off the lanyard on the key to make it less noticeable. When I got home a couple hours later, the caretaker was finally back, so he came up to my room to help me. I stood with him in the hallway for over a half hour, until he finally managed to get it out. He told me the lock was damaged, but it wasn't absolutely necessary to get a new one, since my door had 2 locks. I thanked him for his help, and he left, and that was the end of it. I really wasn't all too worried, because I'd still be able to use both of the locks when I was inside the apartment. Flash forward to 2 months later, I was taking out the trash one night around 11 p.m. while on the phone with my sister. We'd often talk on the phone since we were rarely able to see each other since I moved out. I was telling her about my plans that night, explaining how I was going to take a quick shower and then go to a party. Like I said before, I always lock the door, even when I'm only gone for a minute to take out the trash. Because of my main lock still being damaged, I only locked it once from the outside whenever I left. When I got back to my apartment, I froze in my steps when I found the door unlocked. I was almost positive that I locked it before, which immediately alarmed me. I went into the apartment and locked the door right away, just to make sure the other lock wasn't broken. Thankfully, it still worked, and I double-locked myself inside. My apartment is only 215 square feet, so the layout is pretty simple. The main living room area is directly in front of the door across the room, and the bathroom is immediately on the left when you step in. I had left the bathroom door slightly open, and when I walked by it, I noticed something that stopped me in my tracks. In the bathtub, behind the shower curtain, I could see the silhouette of a large person standing in my shower. I instantly panicked and sprinted towards the door to leave as fast as I could. For whatever reason, the main lock that was damaged from about 2 months earlier was jammed and wouldn't turn, despite trying as hard as I possibly could. At that moment, my fight or flight instincts kicked in. Realizing I was completely trapped and in serious danger, my only other option was the window. Without really thinking, I jumped out of the window, figuring it was my only choice. The problem was that I lived on the 2nd floor, so I completely crushed my ankles on the landing. Despite the immense pain, I limped as fast as I could away from the building. When I was maybe 50 feet away, I looked back and made eye contact with the man staring at me through my window. As I limped further away, I eventually found a bush, so I hid by it and called the police, who luckily arrived in 10 minutes since I lived close to the police station. They kicked my door open and found a man sitting on my couch, holding a kitchen knife, waiting for me to come back. They arrested the guy, and later told me he had already been arrested for assault, attempted kidnapping, and attempted murder. Since my apartment was in a very friendly neighborhood with mostly college students, he was able to get inside the building by having other people hold the door for him. Although I didn't see him at first, he must have heard me telling my sister I was going to take a shower, which was why he was waiting in the bathroom for me. The police determined that he crocheted my lock while I was taking out the trash, and later learned in questioning that he noticed me on school campus and followed me home several times before finally breaking in. Just a week before this happened, I had just gotten a new phone, so my old one was left on the counter. When he entered my apartment, he spotted the phone and put it in his pocket, thinking I'd have no way of calling for help. I don't live there anymore, but after that incident, the apartment gave everyone a building ID, so we had to scan them to get inside. Nothing bad in the neighborhood happened since then, but that night still haunts me to this day.